The Buffalo Bills have boosted the pass rush with a Bosa. Joey Bosa has signed with the Bills Mafia to a 1-year, $12 million guaranteed, $15.6 million deal. Joey Bosa could be the man that the Bills need to go over the top. Not only that, but Joey Bosa knows what it's like to sack Patrick Mahomes. Just going to throw that out there. All right. Joey Bosa has signed with the Bills, 6'5", 280, former third overall pick in the 2016 NFL Draft, a multi-time Pro Bowler, a Pro Bowler of 5 times, 2017, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2024. He has 72 career sacks. The last couple of years, injury-riddled. Only 5 games in 2022, 9 games in 2023, 14, a little bit better in 2024. And his production has certainly declined in terms of sacks. 5 sacks this season, 6.5 the year before, 2.5 the year before. That being said, he's played under Brandon Staley. He has played in a Raven, Mike McDonald-esque defense under this new Michigan regime in Los Angeles. And he has not played in a defense that's truly fit his skill set for quite some time. I would argue since 2021. And in Buffalo, I think it's much, much better for him in terms of his scheme fit. Just a straight 4-man rush, pin your ears back, get to the quarterback. Sean McDermott is going to love this guy. He's a well-rounded player, right? He can set the edge. He can get to the quarterback. I already really like their signing of Hoecht from the Rams. That big boy, former D tackle turn linebacker turn edge player, adds some depth to the team. Really good in run defense. Joey Bosa can do it all. But with Joey Bosa at this stage of his career where he's 30 years old, you got to have him in a bit of a rotation. And the Bills love to have a bit of a rotation. They love to have their depth. They love to have their multiple guys in. Now, he did have the most quarterback hits since 2021 with 13, according to Pro Football Reference. He graded this past season as the 72nd best edge rusher in football, which overly is not that impressive, but he was 39th in run defense, 59th in pass rush. In 2023 and 2022, 27th in 2023 when he did play. So in 2023, he only played 5 starts and 9 games. He had 6.5 sacks in 9 games, which is pretty good. That's pretty good numbers, right? So still recently, he's still put up some production. It's just that he's had to deal with these injuries constantly throughout his career. Now, can he stay healthy? Can the Bills keep him healthy for late in the season when they really need him? When they need him in the playoffs, when they need him to get to the quarterback, when they need him to make some plays, get a strip sack. You know, it's only a 1-year deal, right? This is not like signing Von Miller a few years ago where it's like you're paying the guy the bag and he's old and he could get hurt. Like, Bosa isn't that old quite yet. It's more so the injury stuff. And it's only a 1-year deal. It's a mercenary contract, right? So you look at Joey Bosa. In 2023, he had actually, a really good season. He had an 80.3 pass rush grade, 24 pressures in the 9 games, and an 89.9 pure pass rush grade, which was 12th in the NFL. His pass rush grade overall was 17th in the NFL. Okay? This past season, he had 39 pressures in 503 snaps, 6 sacks, 10 hits, 23 hurries, 18 stops. His peak, 72 pressures in 2019, 75 pressures in 2017, 49 stops in 2019. Really well-rounded. I mean, he's never been one of these guys that is just good as a pass rusher or just good as a run defender. I'd actually argue he might be better in run defense now than he is as a pass rusher, but that might have just been some of the stuff with the injuries. But he's a speed to power rusher, uses that his length well, uses his ability to just rip through tackles really well. He does got a good amount of bend. You do wonder if he still has that capability with the injuries he's had. But the thing is with his injuries is a lot of them have been like here or there. Like they haven't been major. Like he's never missed an entire year because he just tore his knee up. Like he's had like some injuries that are kind of just hurt him to be able to keep him on the field. But it's a huge addition, man. I mean, even he got to the Pro Bowl this year. I don't really know how, but he did get to the Pro Bowl. It's a huge addition though. Like this is the guy they needed. Like they needed a pass rusher. And it's not like he's got to be their best pass rusher, right? Like Greg Rousseau is a dog. Like he's paid as the number 1 pass rusher on this team. You put Joey Bosa opposite him as the number 2, and now we're talking. Instead of AJ Epinesa, who becomes more of a role player, as he should be. Mike Hoecht becomes a role player, as he should be. Ed Oliver can complement Bosa and Rousseau on the edge. Ed Oliver is a very good defensive tackle pass rusher. He dominated the AFC Championship, right? He was their best, most effective pass rusher against the Chiefs. So it was evident. Like they, even with as bad as the Chiefs offensive line was in the AFC Championship, they couldn't dominate them. So they needed this type of guy. Hopefully he could just stay healthy and you can get a little bit of magic out of Joey Bosa. He's lost a bit of a step, but I just wonder how much of that has come down to the injuries and the wear and tear. I do think this system for him, where his hand's in the dirt and he's taken off, is much better in Buffalo than it was in Los Angeles, where he's more having to stand up and that sort of thing. So I definitely love this addition. I can't really say. Even the money, like, who cares? It's $12 million guaranteed. It's 1 year. Okay, it is what it is. It's not hurting you long term. You're going for the Super Bowl. You're trying to win the whole damn thing. You're not trying to, like, who cares? You know, the money doesn't even matter. $12 million isn't even that much for, like, a good pass rusher. Like, those guys get upwards of $20 million. Like, Myles Garrett got 40. You know, Myles Garrett got 40. If Joey Bosa can give you 8 sacks on a $12 million contract, you'll be very, very happy about that. And, you know, I'm sure that there's the incentives. If he does play a certain amount of games, he'll get and earn more. Let's dive a little bit deeper into his numbers here. So he actually had his best game of the season in week 9 against the Jets. He had 3 sacks in one game with 6 pressures. That was in week 9 before he got hurt in week 11. So that's interesting to note. I will say that. He was starting to peak. He actually had 5 pressures against Chicago and then 6 pressures against the Jets. And his best grades in week 8 and week 9 against Chicago and the Jets. And then he got hurt. So that's kind of interesting too. Oh, that's in 2023. My bad. 2024. Actually, in 2024, he also was peaking at the end of the season, right? Because he did play in the playoffs. He played against Houston. He had a sack. He had 4 hurries. I don't really remember this, but he did. He had 5 pressures. He didn't grade very well. A 44 grade is not good, but he had 5 pressures, which is pretty good. He had a sack, which is pretty good. He had 4 hurries, which is pretty good. And he had 1 stop, which is pretty good. So he actually had 5 pressures, which was tied for the second most of his season in the last game of his season. And he finished his year with 3 pressures, 3 pressures, 3 pressures, 5 pressures, and 2 sacks in the last 4 games, 3 sacks in the last 6 games. He had his best game of the year against Cincinnati with 8 pressures and 5 hits. He did not get a sack, though. The season started slow for him, though. He only really had, like, up until week 10, where he was on and off with injury, he actually managed to play week 10 through the wild card without missing a game. That's good. But in week 3 and week 8, when he was injured and then coming back from injury, he didn't have a single pressure. Week 2 against Carolina, he only had 1 pressure. It resulted in a sack. The first 2 games of the year, he had 2 sacks, actually. But he didn't put up many pressures or hurries. And so he never really got going until week 11. So that's interesting. Anything else here that's interesting? I'm just kind of looking at his stats. 2 forced fumbles. He did have 8 penalties, but only one of them, I guess, were accepted. Let's see. 67.4 run defense grade was the highest grade that he had out of any category. His tackle grade took a big hit. He had a 15.4 miss percentage on the tackles, but I will say for a defensive end, you're not usually tackling guys. It's usually kind of awkward. So those missed tackle percentages can be kind of misleading because it could be him diving or something. Like, I don't really know what they would evaluate. So, yeah, Joey Bosa, though, overall, I still think he can play. I'm not saying he's a top 10 edge rusher in football anymore, like he used to be, but he's still a good player when he does play, productive player when he does play, a sack specialist when he does play, and they've got a nice little rotation build here. 4 edge rushers that I like. 4 different edge rushers, right? Rousseau, great athlete, speed rusher, good length, good power, all-around defensive end 1. Joey Bosa, savvy vet, proven sack artist. When he's on the field, will be productive, and an all-around edge player. Mike Hoecht is a specialist against the run, big body, can play inside, outside, can stand up. AJ Epinesa, really savvy, good athlete, really smart, and plays well in that system. So I like the build. I like the room. I like Bosa in Buffalo. That's it, boys. That's it. Joey Bosa. I kind of wanted him to go San Francisco, but it's all good. The Buffalo Bills have made a big addition to their receiving core. One of the Mitch favorites over the last couple of years, but I was really disappointed with how he performed last year in Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman's offense. But maybe, just maybe, in Buffalo, he could have a breakout season. That's Joshua Palmer. Josh Palmer, the Los Angeles Charger, who's seen some pretty good seasons in LA, now is going to be a Buffalo Bill. He adds an interesting dimension and element to their receiving core, a potential replacement and upgrade from Mac Hollins. We'll talk about that in this video. Also, Mike Hoecht, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He is a very unique player, a player that is much larger than the average defensive end. He is a converted defensive tackle who plays a hybrid linebacker edge position. He's a DN that kind of plays like a linebacker, and there's even tape of him shadowing DK Metcalf in the slot. So this is a very unique addition to the Bills and an interesting receiver addition as well. So Palmer signed a 3-year, $36 million contract. That's where I want to start. Palmer has always been a guy that I felt like was slept on and underrated because he's had some production even as a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. The Chargers obviously had a lot of injuries at wide receiver over the years between Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And between those two guys going down, Palmer saw a surge in production at times. Like, for example, 2022, 23 years old, he had a 72 catch, 769 yard season, 3 touchdowns. He averaged 48 yards per game. And if you look at some of the games in which Keenan Allen and Mike Williams didn't play, Josh Palmer actually produced a lot. And what I like about Josh Palmer's game is his ability to be interchangeable. He can play inside, he can play outside. And that's what the Bills have kind of made a pretty big part of their offense. They like these guys that can play inside or outside. So Palmer, he can play as the X receiver on the outside of the formation, which he probably will play more often than not for the Bills and be a complement to Coleman because they drafted Coleman to be that guy. But at the same time, Coleman's tape in college was always kind of better in the slot. I will say that. He is kind of a little bit better on the inside, all right? But I will say with Palmer, he's had experience playing in the slot. He's had experience playing on the outside. And he's been very he's been very consistent over the last couple of years. But last year was actually a down season for him. He only had 584 yards, 39 catches, and 1 touchdown, which isn't awful as a complimentary receiver, but it's not what they expected or what they wanted or what I was expecting. Because the year previous, he put up 581 yards and 38 catches on 15 yards a catch in only 10 games. So he had more production in 10 games in 2023 at 24 years old than he did in 2024 at 25 years old. And he's got a good frame to him. I feel like he's got pretty good thickness. At 6'1", he feels like a guy that's more 6'2", 6'3". Kind of looks a little bit bigger than he is, I believe. 210 pounds. He's actually Canadian. He was at least born in Toronto, Ontario. So shout out to him. He also attended high school. So there it is. He attended high school. I didn't even know this. I'm Canadian myself. I didn't know that he's from Canada. So shout out to Josh Palmer. But, oh, Canada. We got our boy from Canada here. Going to the Bills, which makes a lot of sense too, because Toronto's favorite team is the Buffalo Bills. So that makes a lot of sense. It's very close. So, yeah, I mean, I like Palmer. I've always liked Palmer. I like his versatility. I don't think he's like the most dynamic player ever. I don't think he has the most speed I've ever seen. He's not like a huge vertical. Like, the thing is, he's not like a crazy fast guy, but the last 2 seasons, he averages 15 yards a catch. So you could say one thing about him, like he's not a guy that typically is going to be beating people down the field with speed, but he also has a yards per catch that would indicate he is a vertical player, like he's a deep of the field player. So it's kind of similar to Mac Hollins, where neither of them, on the surface you would think they're deep threats, but with Palmer, it's kind of been the case. With Hollins, it's kind of been the case. Kind of similar in that regard. Palmer also involved as a blocker heavily last season with the Chargers, which is something that Hollins was asked to do a lot, and he will be asked to do. Palmer will be asked to do in Buffalo for sure, being that they like to run the ball a little bit more last year. So let's look a little bit deeper into Josh Palmer in terms of the PFF stuff, the grading and things like that. I feel like he's probably at his best as a wide receiver 3, if I were being honest with you. He graded as the 66th best receiver in football, so that's right alongside Keon Coleman at 63. That's around what Amari Cooper graded at 61, and that's above Curtis Samuel at 71. Khalil Shakir was the only good receiver that graded for the Bills last year. He was top 25. But throughout his career, he's listed around, like last year 63rd, this year 66th. So he's kind of seen as, if you're doing the math, that's a third receiver. That's a third receiver in the NFL. A high-end third receiver, I guess you would look at it that way. But yeah, 616 snaps last season. Looking at some of the in-depth stats for Mr. Palmer. Let's see. He had, what did he do? 28 first downs. What was his yards per route run? That's something I want to look at. He's not much of a yak guy from the eye test, but let's see if I'm correct about that. He played 6 based on the other personnel they have. 1.49 yards per route run. It's not bad. It's not terrible. 2.6 yak per reception, which isn't great. He's probably the worst yak guy on the Bills. Like 162nd in the NFL. So, yeah, not great. In terms of ADOT, that's an interesting stat for him, where his average depth of target was 15 yards downfield, which was 10th highest in the NFL. So that's also, that could be improved upon in Buffalo. Like, he could get more short receptions for sure. But yeah, the Bills bring in a bit of a deep threat there. A guy that can play on the outside, a guy that can mix in with the rest of their rotation and complement what they already have with a bit more size and a ability to play on the outside. Now, Michael Hoecht is 6'4", 267. He is an edge player who was a converted interior defensive lineman and D tackle that moved to the edge. The last 3 years, he's been a really critical part of the Rams defense that not a lot of people talk about because he provides a lot of versatility. 4.5 sacks in 2022, 6 sacks in 2023, and 3 sacks in 2024. Now, because of the surge from the younger players in the front seven of the Rams, he saw some lesser snaps last year, but really underrated player because he can bring some size, bring some strength, bring some set the edge to your defense, and provide some run defense and some beef for your team. So he's had his moments as a pass rusher. I kind of feel like he's more in there to stop the run. I'm going to check out some of his PFF run stuff here. So looking at his run defense, he had a 74.7 run defense grade, which is a good grade overall. He also had 18 stops in the run game last year, which was 19th in the NFL. That's pretty good. When we look at 2023, let's see if it's even improved upon there. Let's see. He had 12. Okay, 12. So he actually had a better season this year in run defense, at least. But he had more sacks in previous seasons. This year was actually his second highest grade of his career, his highest run defense grade of his career, his second highest pass rush grade of his career. He had 30 pressures this season, 43 last year. So yeah, this is a good rotation player. I feel like he'll play important snaps for the Bills. He can complement like an AJ Epinesa and a Gregory Rousseau. So, yeah, interesting. I like these Bills signings. I feel like both of them can play a role. I do still feel like they need another really awesome receiver, which they don't have on their roster right now. I feel like they could use a safety. I feel like they could use some improvement with a stud defensive player that they don't currently have. But this was not going to be like a super crazy free agency for the Bills because basically their entire roster is back. I mean, they really don't have that many holes, and they're one of the best teams in football. So we'll see what they do in the rest of free agency.